Good morning, everybody. So we're in November already on bonfire night today. Um, and so today's subject, we are looking at our self-worth, our ability to value ourselves rather than waiting for other people to value us first. Um, and this felt like a really important topic to cover because I think it's such a common issue. And I don't know that necessarily it ever completely goes away. I think we all have some blocks around this that perhaps show up in slightly different ways as we move through our lives. But it's such a common thing for us to be waiting for some external validation or relying on that external confirmation from other people. And to a certain extent, there is some importance in that. We don't want to be completely isolated in our opinion of ourselves. I think the relationships we have and being open to feedback and all of those things are healthy and normal. But when our real core sense of self-worth or our sense of value is only coming from outside, that puts us in a really precarious position. And it's going to affect all our relationships, and it has a huge impact in our business. And as is the case so often when we're thinking about business things, and we might think about this almost as a separate issue to maybe our personal lives. But in this situation where we're all self-employed and who we are is such a big part of our business, these things are very intertwined. And so when we're relying on other people to recognize us and see the value in what we offer, this is going to make it really hard for us to promote ourselves. So even just thinking about basic marketing, and I know that is a case for a lot of yoga teachers and a lot of therapists, that they find it really hard to get their head around self-promotion because it kind of taps into that feeling of being a show off or boasting or having this huge ego, like, hey, I'm so fabulous, like you should come and work with me and pay me tons of money because I'm amazing. There is that fear of being like that. And when we think about some of the yoga philosophy as well, this idea that we're meant to be unattached, to manage our ego, to not be chasing fame and glory and these things. And there's definitely there are some valid points around that. And I think also, being based in the UK, I'm just aware of our culture here as well, is very anti showing off, being proud of yourself, saying, hey, I'm so great, good job, me. It's always seen as this very American thing that, culturally we're less comfortable with recognizing what we're good at, being proud of it, sharing it with other people. So all of these things can combine to us sort of shrinking a bit. And there just may be this secret longing to be recognized and discovered. So we don't necessarily want to put ourselves forward and talk about all the reasons why we're great at what we do or what makes us unique or why people should come work with us. But somehow there's this wish that magically people will discover us and they will do all the praising and singing our praises to other people. And so, again, this leaves us in a very disempowered position where, our value and, even our marketing we can almost hand that over to other people and then sort of sit there really wishing that we get all the things we want. And then there's also our inner blocks as well, about whether deep down we really believe and feel that we're worth the things that we want. And this is often where there's a disconnect or a mismatch, that on paper, if I was to say, like, just write down your dreams for your life, your business, and you could write down, oh, I want a massive beach house, and I want, my classes to be really full. I want to run amazing retreats somewhere exotic. I want to have lots of free time. Like, you could write down all your fantasy life, like your big dream vision of what you would like. And then when you sit with that, what you might find is that deep down, you might feel that it's not okay for you to have those things. So there's part of you that wants it, and there's maybe part of you that's saying, oh, but really, are you a good enough teacher to earn that much money? Are you really so amazing to have classes that are that full? Maybe there's even a fear of having, a big successful retreat, because it's a little bit exposing if there's lots of people coming. And that if deep down there isn't that self-worth, then we may be doing things that sabotage ourselves in a really subtle way, because deep down we don't really believe that we're worth these things. And so there then becomes, as I say, this really disempowering situation where we have our needs, our desires, our wishes. Part of us maybe feel like we don't quite deserve it. And so then we're not taking the steps we need to make those things happen, or just in a very unconscious way, self-sabotaging, and then really wishing that other people will see us and recognize how brilliant we are, and that all these things will come without us having to do that kind of self-promotion. And it can be very subtle. I think most of us probably don't go around very consciously feeling that we're not worthy. But we can carry these kind of hidden, silent blocks, these little beliefs, and it plays out in our behavior. And a lot of this can be seen in our boundaries. This is why our boundary issues are another reason why boundaries are so important, because it often highlights some of these beliefs that we might have. So, for example, if we're not really valuing our time, for example, if we're not valuing ourselves, if we don't feel like our time is important, that we're important, and that our time is worth something, then this can show up in ways that you might believe are being flexible, being kind, looking out for other people, being a good person. And again, with then that feeling of hoping that other people notice how great you are. But it's sort of waiting for other people to give you permission to have the time that you need for yourself, rather than holding a stronger boundary. So this, say in the context of work, this might be around how available you are. If we don't have clear times around when you're available to be contacted, when you're available, say, for one-to-ones or covering classes, or say a studio phoning you last minute saying, oh, this teacher's sick, can you come in? Or, you know, if you set up an expectation that your time is not so important and other people can mess you around, cancel last minute, rearrange things, call on you in the last minute, you know, in a way, we can't blame other people if we've sort of created that expectation by not really holding our boundaries. And I see this a lot where there then becomes a bit of resentment about not getting what we need and feeling like other people are not treating us well, and yet we're not holding our boundaries ourselves. And so, and I've definitely done this, you know, I've felt so, I suppose there's this fear maybe of losing a client. And this is something that taps into our self-worth as well. So there's definitely been times where I've allowed, say, one-to-one clients to kind of mess me around a little bit because it's well paid, and, you know, feeling like this is something that I wanted to build up, was a number of one-to-one clients. It was part of my business plan. And I guess deep down, there was a little fear there that maybe I wasn't as good a teacher as I thought. Maybe I wasn't quite worth what I was charging. And so there was this real fear that if I held some boundaries and said no to some things, that they'd just go off and find another teacher. Whereas over time, and these things do still come up, I think they never completely disappear, but I'm more able to recognize it when it happens and sort of hold my nerve and have a word with myself. And even recently this week, I had an inquiry for a new person who wanted to work with me. And they asked, when am I available? And everything sounded great. And then at the last minute, they then said, oh, by the way, what do you charge? So I emailed back with all my rates. And then I heard nothing for like 24 hours. And in that time, I was just aware of these thoughts of, oh, you know, maybe I am charging too much. You know, am I really worth what I, you know, all of these things where that self-doubt comes in. And so those thoughts and feelings come up, and then I needed to have a word with myself about, okay, so what I'm offering is very bespoke. It's a specialist service. I'm going to their house. You know, I'm taking the time, the effort, the travel. My time is worth this. You know, I'm a very experienced, qualified teacher, you know, and sometimes we just need that reality check, because sometimes these fears can be quite young. They can come from a place of, you know, maybe these things, these thoughts or beliefs came in an early part of our lives. And so it's almost like we need the more adult part of ourselves to have a word with the panicking child self. He's going, but nobody's going to love me. You know, and that might sound a little extreme, but, you know, we have these thoughts and feelings deep inside, and they come out in these ways. And this is why I think the inner work is really important, because it starts to play out in how we run our adult lives, how we run our businesses. So with this person, so part of me almost wanted to follow up with another email saying, oh, well, but if you come to my place, then, you know, the prices are, you know, I was worried that the price was the thing that was making them hesitate or maybe change their mind. And I thought, no, I've thought long and hard about my prices. There's a reason why they are where they are. And if I was to start to discount that, it undervalues my time, my expertise, you know, my whole business plan. And I need to hold out for people who are able to see the value in what I do. And, you know, it was about a day later and she said, oh, so sorry, I was super busy with stuff. Yeah, that day and time is fine. There never was an issue about the price. That was all in my head. And so these are things to be mindful of, that we don't always know what's going on for other people, but we need to hold that value within ourselves so that we take decisions that support our well-being and that support our business so that we can build this really sustainable business. So I would really recommend spending some time on where there may be some blocks for you, where you may feel some frustration in your business, and see what your boundaries are around that. What are your terms and conditions? So things like when you're available, when you're not, when is your cancellation policy or reschedule policy? If people are buying, say, a course of classes and they miss one, does that class carry, or is that considered that class has gone, they just didn't come? Like thinking about all of these things, thinking about your pricing, and not only the pricing, but also the terms of payment, like when people pay, and have a few things that just are not up for negotiation that you've thought through. So it's not just a plucked out of thin air. So you've thought through, you've reasoned it, and then they're just not up for negotiation. And that's the self-worth, that when you've set your price and someone wants to haggle with you, to not get drawn into feeling like you have to justify in the way that there are certain things that where we have a boundary that you don't feel the need to justify because it's really, really clear for you, and it would feel a bit weird for someone, I don't know, like to just come in your house and ask, can they just walk off with a painting because they particularly like that one? You'd be like, no. You wouldn't necessarily feel the need to justify why. It's like, no, that's a boundary. That's just not a thing that's done. It's not a negotiation. So we need to have a few things like that in our business as well, that, you know, certainly at times we might want to put a survey out and ask people, like maybe you want some feedback about days and times that people would like classes, and then you can think about setting up your schedule. But things around, I'd say particularly around time and money, they are things that you really need to have some strong boundaries on, because it's so connected with your self-worth. So, you know, giving away your time for free is a sign to other people that your time's not worth very much. You know, if you end up after a class spending a lot of time with a student who has lots of questions and you're almost giving them a one-to-one for free, what that's demonstrating to people is that your time's not worth so much because they can just access it for free when they want. And they're not necessarily going to recognize the value of what you've just given them. They'll appreciate having the time and the information, but they won't necessarily value it in the way that they should be valuing it, because it's not come from us first. So rather saying something like, it's great you have so many questions. I don't have time right now, but if you'd like to book a one-to-one with me, we can work through this in detail. And then, in a kind way, we're letting people know, it's like, oh, this kind of information you want has value. My time has value, my expertise has value. And so if you want to access that, more than a 5-minute conversation or a quick question after class, of course, is fine. But if someone's wanting to go into big depth, then that's something that they need to value, your expertise and your time. The same as people showing up late. I know in group classes, often it's a policy that you can't come in after a certain time. But again, if you're working with one-to-ones, and I've had that expectation from some clients who rock up late and think they're still going to get their whole hour, and have even said on coming in, oh, have you got anyone straight after me? And in a way, it's irrelevant whether I have or not. They've booked this bit of time and I've got other things planned for the time afterwards. So if you come late, you miss some of your class. But again, if we don't hold those boundaries, then we are showing to other people that we don't value our time. So if we don't value our time enough to say no, or to have those boundaries around time, then why on earth would anybody else? And that's the importance of our own self-worth, is that we need to almost educate other people, rather than, because what I see quite often is over delivering, over giving, and then kind of this wish or expectation that that is somehow recognized and rewarded. And often it isn't. It just gets taken for granted. And then that builds resentment. And ironically, then sort of increases that lack of self-worth, because we've given all of this amazing stuff to someone and they're not valuing it. And so that becomes even more disheartening. And this is the danger of having your self-worth, or your value, held by other people. We really need to hold that within ourselves, and then that automatically spreads out to other people, that when we're really clear about what we're worth, people are much more likely to feel lucky to have time with you, rather than taking it for granted, thinking that they can just call on you at any time, they can rearrange last minute, they can haggle your prices, they can push boundaries, they can get a bit more for nothing. It really needs to come from us first. So there's that self-worth and that self-respect, looking after our own needs. And this is also modeling to our students as well, because everybody to some degree in some areas will have issues around their self-worth and their self-confidence. And so the more we're able to demonstrate that to others, we're also, it's another form of teaching as well, that in a way it's a kindness to others to to demonstrate how much we value ourselves, that they can start to see like, oh, well, maybe I could take that and use it in my own life. When they see that somebody that they like and respect takes care of themselves, has a good sense of their own worth, has clear boundaries, then that might give them some phrases and behavior that they can try out and copy in their own lives to help them build their own self-worth. So what I would recommend for you today, or whenever you watch this on catch up, is to spend a little bit of time thinking about or feeling into where some of your blocks may be. And this is just between you and yourself. So you don't have to be embarrassed about what some of your, deeper beliefs are around your value and what you're worth, your level of expertise, all of those things. Be really honest with yourself, because once you know what some of those blocks are, then you can take some steps. So, for example, if you perhaps deep down don't really value your time enough, or there's a real fear that people aren't going to like and respect you if you hold boundaries, or all of those things, find out what they are, and then take one or two small steps. I think don't try to fix everything all at once. It can be really overwhelming and difficult to sustain. But have a look maybe at what your policies and procedures are, for example, and maybe some of our boundaries around time and money can be a good place to start. And if you don't have clear policies and procedures, maybe to write some. If you know that you might be over available messaging wise, that your students can contact you anytime, any day, and you generally get back to them, with a text or an email, then maybe think about some boundaries around that time and let people know. And people often really appreciate clarity. So maybe then the next time you send a newsletter to everybody, you can just be really honest and saying, look, I'm working on my self-care. I need to have a better work-life balance, like we all do. So if you send me a message, I'm going to reply to you within these times on these days. So you manage their expectations. It's all very clear. And you're just setting a boundary around, I'm switching my phone off from 7 o'clock in the evening. I won't be picking up messages, or, so if you text me, it's fine, but I'm not going to pick that up until the following morning, and I won't get back to you until the following day. So just letting people know maybe what those boundaries are. And I think, as a last point, that when you build your self-worth, you also reduce fear, because when all of our value is held by other people, they have all the power, and we're really vulnerable to how other people behave and how other people treat us. And we can't control what other people do. But when we have built a strong sense of self-worth, then we're actually more able to be happy with the people who disengage with us, because they're not our people. I had one client over a period of time, and every single time we met, she was questioning my price. She always wanted to arrive late, and then was complaining about not having the full time. Like, she obviously had her own issues going on. And when I just really sort of strengthened my boundaries with her, she eventually didn't come back. And actually, it was a relief because it was very draining to work with someone who was almost on every occasion expecting me to justify my price, my timing, my boundaries, all of those things. It's like, well, if you don't respect them, then maybe you're not the right person for me to work with. So it really reduces that fear when we know deep down that we're a decent teacher, and none of us have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough and to know more than your student, you know, particularly in teaching. As long as we are able to help and support other people, like, we don't necessarily have to be the world's greatest expert on every aspect of yoga and be a complete fount of all knowledge to have value, you know. So have that reality check around your training, your experience, your expertise, you know, what it is that you offer other people. Really write down the value of what you offer, how life-changing yoga can be for people, and really start to build that sense of value in what you do. Value yourself as a person. Your time and your energy are worth something. And the more that you hold that in yourself, then we have more resilience against criticism and knockbacks. You know, I was thinking before about some super famous writers and musicians who got knockback after knockback. They got, you know, publishing deals rejected, and eventually they get signed by someone and then become huge. I think this happened to the Beatles. I think this happened to J.K. Rowling. But if all of their self-belief actually was reliant on other people's opinion, and they get that first knockback and they go, oh yeah, they're probably right, we're rubbish, maybe we shouldn't carry on, you know, that, you know, those things would never have come into existence. So when we have enough self-belief, and some people will say no, and that's completely fine. Maybe we're not the right fit for someone, but it's not that we are not good enough or not worth it. It's just maybe not a good fit. And that becomes easier to see and feel when we have a sense of our inner worth, that we're not going to be the right thing for every person in the world. And that there are some people that maybe we don't want to work with. So it goes both ways. And to hold on to that self-belief and that self-worth, that the right people will come, that you can build a business that really works for you, that we promote ourselves in a way that really just shines a light on why we are really unique, what it is that we offer, what our style is, without embarrassment or shame. It's not showing off. It's just saying, you know, here are my skills. This is what I'm like. This is my approach. And trusting that the right people will come to you, that we're not running around trying to please everyone or desperately seeking approval elsewhere and wanting other people to recognize. It all needs to come from inside. And then that becomes more magnetic, that somebody who has that inner confidence and self-belief just feels like somebody that you might want to work with. And particularly in a therapeutic environment, or in a teaching environment, people are looking for someone who can hold them, you know. And so if we are coming across as being apologetic and needy and seeking their approval by itself, that alone is going to either consciously or unconsciously put people off, because what they're looking for is someone with a bit of, I know, authority and strength who can help them grow. So you need to sort of be this bigger, strong container for other people. So it's really important that we have this self-belief. And there are times where it wobbles, and that's completely normal. So just to say, that you don't want to get caught in a loop of noticing maybe that you're not feeling so confident one day and then feeling like everything else is going to collapse afterwards. These things, they wax and wane with time. But I think having as part of your regular practice, maybe some affirmations or a meditation around your inherent self-worth, your value just as a human, um, your right to take up space in the world, your right to have your needs met, some of those basic things, to have that as a regular practice. Your right to say no to things that aren't good for you. All of these things can just start to strengthen that sense of being worthy of the life that you want to create for yourself. And I doubt that anybody here, is looking for something that would be deemed, completely excessive. We're not trying to take over the world. We're just trying to create a life that is comfortable and enjoyable, where we can thrive and live that full expression of ourselves, and spread that to other people. So none of what we want is being greedy or obnoxious in any way. So I think we just need to really focus on building that inner sense of self-worth that can shine out to other people, and that in itself actually becomes attractive, rather than, our deeper fear that it might be, us showing off, and that puts people off. I think it's actually the reverse. If it's done in a really conscious way of just simply sharing who you are and what you offer and what's available, and just putting that out there, and trusting that people will come. So I hope that's given you some practical steps and some food for thought. If there's any little breakthrough moments, or any little aha moments, then do feel free to share in the comments. It's always lovely to hear what resonates with people, or if there was a particular thing in today's session that really rang true for you. It'd be lovely to hear that. And I will look forward to joining you same time next week. Take care.